Hey everyone, it's Karishma from Pathways Education with another workshop. Today we're going to be covering DNA replication, and this presentation is going to be under the STEM pathway. You can find a worksheet and the answers to the worksheet in the description box below. Feel free to fill it out while watching this video or after as a way to sort of see how much you've learned. So let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be today's pathway. And the first thing that we're going to be talking about is DNA in humans. So let's start off by talking about cells. A cell is the fundamental unit of life. So on the right-hand side is a diagram of a cell. You may or may not have seen this before, but cells are very important to the field of biology. And that is because they are the smallest unit of life that can function independently. You can see that there are many components to a cell, things called ribosomes, mitochondria, lysosome, Golgi body. They have cool names, but we won't be covering all of them today. That will be in a separate video. But today I just want you to focus on the nucleus, which is right here. So cells are extremely small. We can't see them with our own eyes, but nonetheless, they're very important. You are made up of cells. So here's a real-life application. How many cells are in the human body? And a hint is that it's a very large number, and take into account the fact that we said on the last slide that they are extremely small and that we can't see them with our own eyes. So you can pause the video and sort of take a guess. I'm going to move on to the next slide, which has the answer on it. So there are 30 trillion cells inside the human body. And this is sort of the average number that scientists have kind of came to the conclusion to, but it could vary, be a little larger, a little less, but nevertheless, 30 trillion is a very, very large number. So just thinking about this, thinking about the fact that there are these many cells inside of you should sort of give you an idea of how small they actually are. So another important question that we have to ask ourselves is, do you have the same cells your entire life? Meaning, are the cells that were in your body when you were born the same cells that are in your body now? And the answer to this question is no. So each type of cell has a different lifespan, but they have the ability to replicate themselves. So basically, they have the ability to sort of replicate whatever is inside whatever is inside the cell and then split into two. So the average body makes about 2 to 3 million red blood cells every second. So this is just for red blood cells, but there are over 200 different types of cells in the body, each with their own schedule of replication. So some cells like to replicate a lot, very frequently. Others have a little bit of a longer lifespan and take a little bit longer to replicate. But the cells are always dividing. So if you watched our presentation on DNA, the blueprint of life, you would remember that DNA is found in the nucleus. And actually, I would suggest watching that video before watching this video so you have a general idea of the structure of DNA, because without really having a solid understanding of DNA structure, it will be a little bit more difficult to understand the topic of DNA replication. So back to the slide, the same DNA is found inside almost every cell in the body. And specifically, it is found in the nucleus. So another way you can think about the nucleus is the control center of the body. And this is where your DNA is found. So you might be thinking, if DNA is found inside cells, and cells undergo replication, then DNA must also need to be able to replicate. So sort of let that sink in for a little bit. It's sort of the logic train of what we just covered, that if DNA is found inside cells and these cells undergo replication, then DNA, which is inside cells, must also be able to replicate. So that brings us to our next topic, which are the steps of replication. Now, really quickly, before we talk about the steps of replication, let's just review DNA structure really quickly. There are 4 nitrogenous bases: adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. And these are the 4 bases that are found in the DNA in every single one of your cells. And there's a very specific pairing pattern between the two bases. I'm sure you'll be able to figure it out by looking at the diagrams. And the pairings are adenine always pairs with thymine, and guanine always pairs with cytosine. So unless there's a mistake in the DNA, you will never find C paired with T or A paired with G. It is always A and T and C and G. Now, just looking at the holistic structure of DNA, it sort of looks like a twisted ladder. So this is sort of the ladder shape. And if you twist the ladder, you will get a structure that looks like this. And this is what scientists have determined the structure of DNA to be. Now here's a quick concept check. After reviewing the structure of DNA, what do you think are some qualities of DNA that make it suitable for replication? So I'll go back to this slide. You can take a look at the structure of DNA. Sort of think about what exactly is it about this structure that makes it easy for the human body to be able to replicate it. So you can pause the video, and I'm going to talk about the answers now. So there are about four main qualities that make DNA easy, quote unquote, easy to replicate. The first is that there are complementary base pairs and rules for base pairing. So like we were saying earlier, A only pairs with T and C only pairs with G. So this sort of gives the body a framework for what pairs with what. There are also two strands of DNA. So if we go back to this picture, we can see that if we sort of cut the DNA ladder in half, we'll get one strand and we'll get another strand. And the cool thing is that because there are rules for pairing, even if we only have one strand, we can figure out what the other strand will be. So if on one side of the strand we had A, G, and T, then without even knowing the other side, the other strand, but just by using our base pair rules, we would know that T would go here, C would go here, and A would go here. So these rules are very, very important for the body. The other thing is that the two strands, like I was saying earlier, they have the ability to separate. That way each one can serve as a template. And DNA structure is the same in every type of cell. So regardless of the type of cell, whether it's a heart cell, muscle cell, skin cell, all the cells can have the same type of machinery needed for replicating the DNA, because the DNA is the same in all of your cells. So now let's go ahead and get started with the steps of replication. The first step is that the DNA unwinds so that the double-stranded helix can be in the proper conformation to separate. So what that means is that, like we said, the DNA is a twisted ladder. So the first step is that the ladder untwists and just basically looks like a ladder like this. So that means that the DNA goes from looking like this, from it being twisted, to looking like this, untwisted. Then helicase, which is an enzyme, separates the double-stranded DNA helix, leaving the two separate strands of complementary DNA. So like I was saying earlier, we could separate the two strands of the ladder like this. So if we go back, the second step is cutting this ladder in half. Then the third step is that DNA polymerase, which is another enzyme, it comes in and it fills in the complementary base pairs. So I have a diagram in just a second, but let's keep going. Another enzyme called DNA ligase fills in all of the gaps in the strands. Maybe there were some gaps that DNA polymerase didn't get, so DNA ligase will come in and help DNA polymerase out and fill in any of the gaps to make the strands smooth. The two strands of DNA then rewind back into the double helix structure, and then the cell is able to continue dividing. So these are just some pictures. So like I was saying earlier, the helix will unwind into this ladder shape, and then the ladder will separate. So here's a really complicated picture, but I'll just point out the enzymes that we discussed. So here's the double-stranded DNA helix here. We'll break this picture down. The helix unwinds and it becomes that ladder. And then DNA helicase goes ahead and separates that ladder. So it breaks apart the yellow and the green rungs of the ladder. Then there's an enzyme called DNA polymerase, and it goes ahead and adds all of the complementary base pairs. So the complementary base pairs are the green base pairs. And let's say this base pair was an A, then this enzyme DNA polymerase would go ahead and add a T in over here. So just by using the rules of base pairing, DNA polymerase can fill in this entire strand, which is really, really cool. So for example, if this was A, G, C, then this would be T, C, and G. So DNA polymerase knows this. It grabs all those different base pairs and just attaches them on. And here's DNA ligase. So sometimes DNA polymerase will leave these little holes here. So DNA ligase just comes in and smooths everything out. All right, so here's some fun facts. According to an estimate, there are nearly 3 billion bases in our genome. And during DNA replication, all of them replicate. And like I was saying earlier, some cell lines, like red blood cells, are constantly replicating. So think how fast your body must be able to replicate DNA if there are 3 billion bases. And each time it has to replicate all of those 3 billion bases. In terms of computer language, if we want to store these 3 billion bases on a computer, it would take 3 gigabytes of storage space on a computer. And when there are any changes in the DNA sequence, which takes place during DNA replication, it's not perfect. It does make mistakes. Sometimes an A will get paired with a G, and a T might get paired with a C. Anytime this happens, it's called a mutation. And accumulations of these mutations or sort of mistakes can lead to a new species. All right, so our last topic we need to cover is, why is DNA replication so important? So DNA is akin to a set of instructions for cells, and it allows for the production of molecules called proteins. Now, you may have heard that in order to become strong, you need to eat a lot of protein, and this is protein. And so DNA is the instructions that your body needs to make proteins. And you might not have known, but your body can make proteins. Cells need proteins to function. Cells need proteins to maintain their structure. Proteins are extremely, extremely important for your body. And if cells replicate without replicating the DNA, then the new cells would not have DNA, and these cells would not be able to perform their duties. So it's really important for the production of proteins that DNA replicates. So here's some food for thought. On the previous slide, we said that DNA allows for the production of proteins. And a very important question that scientists asked in the past was, how exactly do these random strings of A, T, C, and G's code for proteins? How does that happen? An answer to this question was proposed by Francis Crick, who is a very famous scientist, in 1958. His idea was correct, and it is now known as the central dogma. So if you don't know yet how DNA code for proteins, sort of think in your head, how could my body make proteins from just these strings of quote unquote letters, which are actually molecules? Adenine is a molecule, but how is it that the order in which the molecules are found in the DNA, the sequence of the A, T, C, and G's, how does that lead to protein production in a cell? Although we now know the answer to this question, I would like you to propose your own mechanism, and we will discuss this very important discovery in our next presentation. So thank you so much for watching. You can follow us to learn more about the different pathways you can take. We have skill building pathways where you can learn tips on how to build a great resume. We have a nutrition pathway to learn about healthy eating. We also have a financial literacy pathway to teach about basic financial topics like saving. You can visit our Instagram at pathways_edu, and our website, which has all our videos organized and all the worksheets, at www.guidingpathways.org. I hope you learned something new, and thank you again for watching.